Are you serious, Chief? Is this some kind of joke? Colonel Eva Rostova's voice, sharp and strained, cut through the low hum of the hangar. It was a cathedral of military power, a vast climate-controlled cavern built to house a god of the sky. And the god was sick. Before her, the B-2 Spirit bomber, callsign Spirit of Missouri, sat inert and monolithic, its black flying wing shape absorbing the light and the hope of every technician on the floor. For 3 weeks, the entire B-2 fleet, the nation's most critical strategic asset, had been grounded. 3 weeks of failed diagnostics, of swapped-out components, of mounting pressure from the Pentagon. And now, her Chief Master Sergeant had brought her this, an old man. He stood near the massive portside landing gear, a ghost from another era. He wore a faded, dusty red civilian work jacket, the kind you'd see on a farmer or a small-town handyman, layered over a simple heather gray t-shirt. His hands, wrinkled and stained with the memory of 1,000 other engines, were tucked into his pockets. He wasn't looking at the frantic ballet of airmen and engineers with their glowing laptops and diagnostic tablets. He was looking at the plane. Rostova strode across the polished concrete floor, her OCP boots making sharp, authoritative clicks that echoed in the tense silence. The airmen parted before her, their faces a mixture of frustration and weary respect. She was the 509th Maintenance Group commander, the woman responsible for keeping these billion-dollar birds in the air. The failure was hers, and the weight of it had compressed her usual command presence into a brittle, dangerous edge. She stopped a few feet from the old man. He didn't seem to notice her. His gaze was fixed on the complex joint where the landing gear met the wing, an intricate nexus of hydraulic lines and actuators. "Sir," Rostova's voice was firm, stripped of all pleasantry. "This is a restricted area. I need to see your authorization." The old man slowly turned his head. His eyes were pale blue, clouded by age, but holding a deep, unnerving stillness. He looked at her uniform, at the silver eagle on her collar, and gave a slow, almost imperceptible nod. He wasn't intimidated. He wasn't even impressed. He just was. "Don't have any," he said, his voice a low, gravelly rumble. "Just came to look." "Just came to look," Rostova repeated, an incredulous laugh threatening to break through her control. "This isn't a museum. This is an active flight line, and you are standing next to a grounded piece of vital national security. Who are you?" A young, eager lieutenant stepped up beside Rostova. "Ma'am, security is on their way. We don't know how he got this far." Rostova held up a hand, silencing him. She kept her eyes locked on the old man. The situation was an embarrassment on top of a crisis. A civilian, an old one at that, had wandered into the heart of her command during its most vulnerable moment. The crowd of onlookers was growing. Technicians, weary from their 18-hour shifts, had stopped working to watch the bizarre confrontation. It was a distraction, but it was also a spectacle. "I'm going to ask you one more time, sir. Who are you, and what are you doing here?" The man finally pulled a hand from his pocket and gestured with his chin toward the B-2. "Heard you had a ghost in the machine. A pressure leak you can't find." Rostova's jaw tightened. It was the precise problem. A transient hydraulic pressure drop in the primary landing gear deployment system. It only happened under specific aerodynamic loads, impossible to replicate perfectly on the ground. Every diagnostic had come back clean. They had x-rayed the lines, swapped 3 different actuators, and run terabytes of data through modeling software. Nothing. The plane was, for all intents and purposes, perfect, and perfectly useless. "That's classified information," she snapped. "Isn't classified if the machine tells you itself," the old man said, his eyes going back to the landing gear. He took a slow step closer, ignoring the invisible line of military authority Rostova had drawn around herself. He ran a single gnarled finger over a hydraulic coupling, his touch gentle like a doctor checking for a pulse. "With all due respect, old-timer," the young lieutenant interjected, his voice dripping with condescension, "we have the most advanced diagnostic tools in the world. I think we know more about this aircraft than you do." The old man didn't even look at him. He just kept his gaze on the machine. "Your tools can't see memory," he murmured, more to the plane than to anyone else. "They can't see the stress of 1,000 landings. The metal remembers." Rostova had had enough. The condescension from her own officer was irritating, but the folksy wisdom from this trespasser was infuriating. It felt like a mockery of her and her team's exhaustive scientific efforts. "I want your ID. Now," she commanded, "and then you will be escorted off my flight line." The man sighed, a weary sound, and reached into the inner pocket of his red jacket. He pulled out a worn leather wallet, cracked and softened with age. He fumbled for a moment before producing a driver's license. The plastic yellowed and scuffed. He handed it to her. Rostova took it, her gaze clinical. Charles Lindbergh. The name was absurd, a historical echo that felt like part of a prank. Born 1938, address somewhere in rural Missouri. She looked from the photo of the smiling younger man on the ID to the weathered face before her. As she did, her eyes caught on a detail on his jacket she hadn't noticed before. On the right breast, nearly invisible against the faded red fabric, was the ghost of a patch. The threads were almost all gone, but she could just make out the shape, a shield in a fist clutching a lightning bolt. It was the insignia of the Strategic Air Command, SAC, disbanded in 1992. It was a relic, as obsolete as the man wearing it. A flicker, unbidden, flashed through her mind. Not a memory, but an image, sharp and vivid. The roar of 8 jet engines on a cold Dakota morning. The smell of burnt kerosene and freezing steel. She saw a pair of young hands, not yet wrinkled but already calloused, expertly tightening a fuel line on the wing of a B-2, the red fabric of a jacket sleeve stark against the winter sky. The hands belonged to a young man with pale, determined eyes. The image was gone as quickly as it came, leaving behind a faint, inexplicable sense of connection, of a history she couldn't place. She shook it off, dismissing it as a stress-induced phantom. She handed the ID back with a sharp flick of her wrist. "Mr. Lindbergh, your presence here is unauthorized. You need to come with me." "He ain't hurting nothing, ma'am," a voice said. Rostova turned. It was Chief Master Sergeant Davis, the man who had first alerted her. He stood a respectful distance away, his face a careful mask of neutrality, but his eyes were fixed on Lindbergh with an expression Rostova couldn't decipher. It wasn't pity. It was something closer to awe. "Stay out of this, Chief," Rostova warned, her voice low. The humiliation was peaking. Here she was, a full colonel, commander of a vital maintenance group, being sidetracked by a lost senior citizen while her career and her country's security hung in the balance. The murmurs from the crowd of airmen grew louder. They were watching her, judging her, unseen by Rostova, whose attention was locked on Charles. Chief Davis slowly backed away. He kept his eyes on the scene, on the old man now running his bare hand along the length of a thick hydraulic line, his head cocked as if listening to a secret. Davis pulled his personal cell phone from his pocket, his movements economical and discreet. He shielded the screen with his body and scrolled through his contacts, his thumb stopping on a name listed only as G. Miller. He pressed the call button and lifted the phone to his ear, turning his back to the drama. "Sir, it's Davis, at Whiteman," he said, his voice a low, urgent whisper. "You're not going to believe this. They're about to throw an old man out of the B-2 hangar." "No, sir. That's why I'm calling." Davis paused, listening. "Yes, sir. He's wearing that old red jacket you told me about." "Yes, sir. The name on his ID is Lindbergh, Charles Lindbergh." A beat of silence. "Yes, sir," Davis said, a hint of relief entering his voice. "I understand. I'll keep them occupied." He hung up, his face grim but resolute. He knew that a phone call had just been made that would shake the very foundations of the base. The cavalry was coming, and Colonel Eva Rostova was standing on the wrong side of history. Inside a quiet wood-paneled office overlooking the Potomac River, retired General Marcus Miller, a 4-star legend who now served as a senior civilian advisor to the Air Force, slammed his phone down into its cradle. His normally placid, grandfatherly face was a mask of thunderous urgency. "Janet," he roared, his voice shaking the crystal decanters on his credenza. His executive assistant, a woman who had seen him brief presidents without breaking a sweat, rushed in, her eyes wide. "Sir, get me the Secretary of the Air Force on my secure line. I don't care if he's in a meeting with God. You tell him General Miller has a broken arrow situation, and while that's connecting, get me the base commander at Whiteman Air Force Base. His name is Brigadier General Peterson. Find him. Now." Janet flew out of the room, the commands echoing behind her. Miller paced his office, his hands clasped behind his back, his mind racing. Charles Lindbergh. After all these years. He hadn't heard that name spoken aloud in a decade, but the legend was burned into the institutional memory of everyone who had ever worked on the B-2 program. They called him the ghost of the Skunk Works, the mechanic of the impossible. He was a civilian engineer from the original Northrop team in the 80s, a quiet, brilliant man who saw machines not as collections of parts but as living things. He had designed the B-2's notoriously complex hydraulic systems, not on a computer but on a drafting board, with a slide rule and an intuition that bordered on supernatural. His name was on a dozen classified patents for the alloys and seals used in its construction. He had retired 20 years ago, vanishing back into the Missouri landscape from which he came. "General Peterson on line 2, sir." Janet's voice came through the intercom. Miller snatched the phone. "Peterson, this is Miller. I don't have time for pleasantries. You have a civilian in your main B-2 hangar. His name is Charles Lindbergh. Is that correct? There was a stunned silence on the other end. General, I have no idea. I'm in a planning brief. Then get out of your brief, Miller commanded, his voice cold as liquid nitrogen. Your entire B-2 fleet is down because of a hydraulic ghost your people can't find. And the man who designed that system, the only man on Earth who knows its secrets, is standing in your hangar right now. And I have it on good authority that your maintenance group commander is about to have him arrested for trespassing. You will go down to that hangar. You will find Mr. Lindbergh, and you will give him anything he asks for. Am I clear, General? Crystal, sir. Peterson's voice was now tight with alarm. I'm on my way. Back in the hangar, the atmosphere had grown thick with unspoken tension. Rostova had received a curt, inexplicable message from the command post. Hold your position. Do not remove the civilian. Await instruction. The order made no sense. It was a direct contradiction of every security protocol she had ever known. The delay only frayed her nerves further. The old man, Charles, seemed oblivious. He had knelt down, his old knees cracking, and was now peering into the dark recesses of the wheel well, his brow furrowed in concentration. This was the final indignity. Her authority was being questioned by some invisible hand, all because of this relic. She made a decision. Protocol or not, she had to restore order. All right, that's it, she said, her voice dangerously quiet. I'm done with this circus. She turned to the nearest security forces airman, a young sergeant with a nervous expression. Sergeant, I am ordering you to escort this man to the security building. We'll sort this mess out there. The sergeant looked from his superior officer to the strange, calm old man and back again. He took a hesitant step forward. Ma'am. But before he could finish, a new sound cut through the hangar. Not a siren, but the distinct, urgent squeal of tires on pavement, followed by the authoritative slam of heavy car doors. Every head turned towards the massive hangar entrance.